Hi, I'm Aileen. I called my mom from the hospital, 2 broken ribs, a concussion, and she laughed. She said, "Your sister just had a baby. No visit, no flowers, just silence. Until they needed my blood." But what if this wasn't about a baby at all? What if the accident was just the beginning, and the real betrayal had been happening for years? Want to know what my family really wanted from me? The beep of the heart monitor was the first thing I noticed when I woke up. That, and the sterile scent of antiseptic mixed with something faintly metallic. My throat was dry, my leg felt like a slab of stone, and every breath made my ribs scream. It took a full minute to understand where I was. St. Joseph's Medical Center. The clock on the wall read 4:17 p.m. The soft light streaming through the blinds told me it was late afternoon, but what hit me harder than the pain was the silence. No flowers, no notes, no missed calls, just a single IV drip, the dull hum of machines, and me. I pressed the nurse button twice before someone finally showed up. She smiled, told me I'd been out for nearly a day and a half, surgery went well, and they'd tried contacting my emergency contacts. That word, emergency contacts, felt heavier than it should have. I had just one listed, my mom. She hadn't come. I waited. Another hour, then another. I stared at the phone on the table beside me like it might ring if I willed it hard enough. Eventually, I gave in. I picked it up and dialed her number. She answered on the third ring laughing, actually laughing. "Oh God, Aileen, you always call at the worst moments. Your sister just had her baby. Can't you go 5 minutes without drama?" I didn't say anything at first. My brain struggled to bridge the gap between what I expected and what I just heard. "I was in a car accident," I said slowly, like explaining it to a stranger. "Well, Lucy gave birth this morning. A little girl. We're here with her now, so if you're okay enough to call me, I guess you're not dying." The call ended just as casually as it began. "No, I love you." No concern. Just silence on the line after the last sentence, like I was someone who'd inconvenienced her. My fingers trembled as I placed the phone back on the table. That night, sleep didn't come easy. Every breath hurt, but not as much as the pit in my stomach. How many birthdays had they missed? How many holidays had I spent alone while Jolene, Lucy now, I guess, was always the star? The one they showed up for. I was the one with straight A's. The one who got the finance job out of college without help. I didn't get a balloon, not even a card. I was 34, and I felt like an orphan. The next morning, my phone started vibrating again. The screen flashed, Mom, then Dad, then back to Mom. Over 20 missed calls in less than an hour. I let them ring. I was too tired to care. By the afternoon, I answered, only because I was too worn out to ignore it. "Caroline, sweetheart." Mom's voice was suddenly soft, trembling, unrecognizable. "We need your help. It's urgent." My eyes narrowed. "Now it's urgent?" "It's about the baby," she said quickly. "Lucy's daughter. She has a rare blood condition. They need a transfusion urgently. You have the same type. Please, honey. You're the only match we know of." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Just yesterday, I was an overdramatic nuisance. Now, I was their only hope? "What hospital are you in?" I asked, voice sharp. "Florida Medical. We already arranged a ticket, first class. We'll cover it." "I'm in a hospital bed, Mom. I had surgery less than 48 hours ago. You didn't care when I was the one bleeding, remember?" Silence. Then a weak, "It's your niece, Aileen. She's family." Family. That word again, as if it still held the same weight. I remembered when I got accepted to Stanford for grad school. They didn't come to graduation. Lucy had a volleyball tournament. They never showed up for my big wins, only when they needed something. "I'll call you tomorrow," I said flatly. "You don't understand." "I do," I interrupted. "More than you think." I hung up. That night, as the Sacramento sky faded from pink to deep blue, I lay still, my thoughts racing. I knew my blood type wasn't rare. I also knew that what they really needed probably had nothing to do with blood. Something didn't add up. And for the first time, I wasn't going to jump just because they snapped their fingers. If I'd closed my eyes, maybe I could have pretended the hospital ceiling didn't look like a maze of fluorescent regret. But sleep wouldn't come. Not after that call. I lay there still and staring, the faint sounds of nurses at the station echoing down the hallway. My body ached, but the bigger pain wasn't physical. It was the realization that I was only family when they needed something. Not when I was alone on Christmas, not when I graduated top of my class. Only when I had something to offer. Why now? Why this urgency? I didn't need a medical degree to know babies usually didn't need specific family blood donors. There were banks for that. So what the hell were they really after? By sunrise, my head throbbed from the questions I couldn't answer. Then came the knock on the door. A tall man in a tailored navy blazer stepped in, holding a slim leather portfolio. He looked around 40, clean-cut, confident. "Aileen Mercer?" he asked. I sat up a little. "Yes, and you are?" "Clayton Voss. I'm an attorney. A mutual contact from your MBA program, Natalie Raymond, said you might need someone who knows how inheritance law works." "Inheritance law?" He took the chair beside me and opened the folder. "I believe your family is asking you to sign a set of documents related to Mercer Realty. Before you do, there's something you need to see." He placed a printed copy of a will on my lap. My grandfather's name was typed at the top. "According to this, you were left 25% ownership in Mercer Realty. Your name, not Jolene's, not your parents', yours." I didn't say anything. My pulse pounded in my ears. "I'm sorry, but—" "What?" I finally whispered. "They never told you. That part's clear," he said gently. "But from what I can tell, your grandfather intended you to have a controlling vote in future board actions." A wave of vindication hit me so hard it made me dizzy. All those years of being treated like I didn't matter. And now I learned I was the one they needed. The one with the power. "I don't even work there," I muttered. Clayton gave a dry smile. "Doesn't change your rights." Before I could process anything further, another knock came at the door. Laurel Sloan stepped in, my old roommate and now a licensed therapist. She held a paper bag and a bouquet of wildflowers. "I brought muffins and moral support," she said. Clayton stood politely, nodding to her before excusing himself. Laurel sat by my bed, handing me a muffin. "You look like you got hit by a truck." "Technically, I did." She blinked. "Oh, right. Sorry." I laughed, an actual laugh, sharp and surprised. Then I told her everything. She listened without interruption, then leaned in and said, "This isn't paranoia. Your gut's been warning you. Trust it. And keep that lawyer close." I nodded. "I don't know how to feel." "That's okay. Just don't sign anything." Clayton returned shortly after with a small envelope. "These are copies of the documents they want you to sign," he said. "It's all phrased like you're releasing medical liability. But buried in the legalese, you'd be signing away your voting rights and shareholdings." My breath caught. "They need your signature, Aileen. That's why they're calling. That's what this is really about." I stared at the documents. Outside the window, the morning sun glinted off the rooftop of a nearby building. If I hadn't been hit by that truck, I would have signed it without a second thought. Clayton left with a nod, promising to check in the next day. I stayed in bed, holding the documents like they were radioactive. I flipped through each page. The signatures were real. The notary seal was clear. Everything about it screamed legitimacy, on the surface. I whispered into the stillness, "Why wouldn't they tell me?" 5 years. 5 years they kept this secret and smiled in my face like nothing was off. I could feel my jaw clench. An email alert buzzed on my phone. No sender, no subject line, just a message. "Your grandfather knew who you were." Attached was a grainy photo of a handwritten note. I recognized the loops and angled cursive. It was Ernesto's handwriting. Below it, a scan of what looked like a will. My name, clear as day, next to a 25% allocation. It wasn't typed. It wasn't legalese. It was real. Another line, typed below the images. "I've kept this safe. I knew they'd hide it. Linda Collins." My stomach dropped. Linda had been our housekeeper from when I was 8 until college. She was kind, firm, and always quietly watching. She was the one who slipped extra cookies into my lunch when Jolene accidentally left me out of hers. I remembered a night, I must have been 11, when I heard yelling from downstairs. My dad and his brother were arguing. "Dad wanted Aileen on the board!" Desmond's voice was furious. "Not Jolene! My father's voice snapped back, cruel and cold. She's too soft. She doesn't have the stomach for this business. I hadn't thought about that night in years, but now it rushed back like a flood. Linda must have known everything, and she waited. Until now. I reached over to the hospital bag Laurel had brought from my apartment. Inside, tucked into a hidden pocket of my old planner, was an outdated contact list from grad school. Desmond Mercer. I hadn't spoken to him since I was a teenager. He vanished after some family disagreement, which, in hindsight, probably meant Dad shoved him out too. I stared at his number. My finger hovered over the call button. Then I tapped. The line rang once, twice. Then a gravelly voice answered. Hello? It was older, rougher than I remembered, but unmistakable. Is this Aileen? I pulled the phone tighter to my ear. Uncle Desmond? There was a pause, like he didn't believe it. My God, you sound like your mother, but sharper. You okay? I've been better. Hospital bed, cracked ribs, and apparently a secret fortune I wasn't supposed to know about. Another silence, then a sigh. They did it to me too, kid. Different decade, same lies. Your grandfather trusted you just like he trusted me. They shut me out after the funeral. I rubbed my forehead. Why? Because control doesn't go to the obedient. It goes to the inconvenient ones, the ones who question everything. You were always the sharp one, Aileen. I saw it before anyone else did. I sat up slowly. Can we meet after I'm discharged? You say when. I've waited a long time to tell you the truth. We hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up again. Dad. Against better judgment, I answered. Aileen, he said, too calm. We're worried. Jolene's still waiting in Florida. The car's already at the airport. I'm not coming. A beat. Don't be childish. I know about the will. Silence. I know what Grandpa left me, and I know you've been trying to erase it. His voice changed, harder, sharper. This isn't about the past. This is about family unity, alignment. Don't talk to me about family. You left me bleeding in a hospital and now you want my signature? Click. A new message popped in from Clayton. Attached was the full contract, pages and pages disguised as a generic medical release. But buried in the fine print, in tangled legalese, was the truth. If I signed it, I'd hand over every right to Mercer Realty. It was a trap. I called back. Dad, I said coldly, try and send me another lie like that again, and I swear I'll send the truth, every last page, to a lawyer and the press if I have to. He didn't reply. The line went dead. For the first time in years, I felt something stronger than fear. Power. Clayton showed up around 9, holding a travel mug and a folder so thick it looked like it could bruise someone. I went through the entire contract, he said, no small talk. Every page. You were right. This was never about the baby. I nodded, jaw tight. They were hoping I'd be too hurt to notice. They almost succeeded. I told him about the call from my father, how he pivoted from faux concern to veiled threats in under 2 minutes. Clayton listened closely, eyes narrowing. They're pushing because they're desperate, and that makes them sloppy. He pulled a printout from the folder and slid it to me. Desmond called. He got internal records. Mercer Realty is bleeding out. Bad investments, fake write-offs, borderline fraud. My stomach nodded. So this isn't just personal, it's survival. They're trying to save the company by selling your stake behind your back. Your shares are the only ones not tied up in debt. I leaned back against the pillow. Of course. Why earn trust when they can just steal it? Desmond joined our call via video a few hours later. His face looked worn, but his eyes were sharp. You were their failsafe, Aileen, and now you're the firewall. He sent over old board memos, damning ones. I skimmed them, heat rising in my chest. They made me believe I was invisible. All this time, I was the threat. Clayton adjusted his glasses. So we moved first. We drafted a legal letter freezing my voting rights temporarily, on my terms. Demand for full transparency, no further contracts, a warning at the end. Any further attempts to solicit a signature without counsel present will result in legal escalation. It was the first thing I signed all week. That evening, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Jolene, a voice memo. You think you're saving something, Aileen? You're not. You're ruining everything. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I wasn't ruining everything. I was uncovering it, layer by filthy layer. The next morning, A man in a blazer showed up at my hospital room with a silver envelope and a rehearsed smile. Delivery for Miss Aileen Mercer, from Mercer Holdings. He didn't wait for a signature. Inside was a formal letter laced with syrupy corporate jargon and an undertone so bitter it could rot teeth. It accused me of willfully destabilizing family operations and inflicting emotional strain on my mother, who, just 5 days ago, laughed when I called from a trauma bed. Tucked in the corner of the page, in neat script, was a handwritten note. "Don't burn bridges you might need. Jolene." I stared at it for a long time before setting it down. Clayton arrived an hour later. I handed him the letter without a word. He read it, then exhaled through his nose. "So now they're playing nice mean." His response wasn't just legal, it was surgical. A cease and desist addressed directly to Mercer Realty's board, citing manipulation, harassment, and intent to defraud. Attached were receipts, emails, phone records, even a breakdown of the disguised contract. "We're not just freezing your vote," he said. "We're holding a mirror up to every lie they've built." Right after lunch, Desmond called. "Brace yourself. Jolene's called an emergency board session for tomorrow. They want to freeze your shares." I laughed, sharp and dry. Let them try. "They're coming at this from all sides, Aileen. Your father's furious. Jolene's saying you've jeopardized your niece's treatment. They're calling you unstable." Of course they are. When truth doesn't work, they invent a new story. That night, I listened to Jolene's voice note again. At 32 seconds, the fake concern curdled into threat. "You've always been jealous. Just remember, little sister, when you tear things down, don't be surprised when they fall on you." I forwarded the clip to Clayton with a note. "If they come for me, I'm coming for all of them." And I knew exactly where to start. Marcus's face appeared on my laptop screen just after noon. He looked nervous, but determined. "I found something," he said without preamble. "Metadata logs from the contract files. Your father and Jolene modified them. They renamed the file to mimic a hospital document, changed timestamps, even spoofed an internal approval chain." I clenched the armrest. "Are you sure?" "They left fingerprints, sloppy ones, a rush job." I closed my eyes for a moment. "That's felony fraud, Marcus." He nodded slowly. "I know." By late afternoon, Desmond called. His voice was tight. "They held a virtual board session. Without you. I recorded part of it." He sent over the file. I clicked play. "She's too reactive," Jolene sneered. "No real edge, always so eager to please." Then my father. "She's been a liability since day one. She's only dangerous now because she knows too much." And in the background, clear as day, my mother. "She won't push back. She never has." My chest didn't burn this time. It froze. I opened my LinkedIn account, paused, then typed, "There's always more to the story, especially when you're the one they tried to erase." I hit post. Within minutes, messages started rolling in, former employees, old colleagues. "About time." "We're watching." "We've got your back." Clayton pinged me. That got their attention. 10 minutes later, his assistant slid an envelope under my hospital door. It was a cease and desist. "Defamatory behavior will result in immediate legal consequences," it read. Thick, glossy, expensive paper. I stared at it, then tore it in half and stuffed it into the biohazard bin beside my bed. They wanted war? They were about to see exactly what I'd inherited. The Mercer boardroom looked exactly as I remembered it. Cold, cavernous, intimidating. But this time I didn't walk in as the outsider. I came in on crutches, yes, but I stood taller than ever. Clayton walked beside me, Desmond just behind. Jolene glanced up from her seat, startled to see me there in person. Dad stiffened. His hands were clasped in front of him, like a man bracing for a storm. Across the long table sat Diane Richter, an independent board member Grandpa once called the last honest person on payroll. She nodded once, then gestured for us to sit. "Let's proceed," she said. Before anyone else could speak, a screen blinked to life at the end of the table. "Sorry to interrupt," came a man's voice, Lyle Harland, former investor. "Thought the board should hear why I divested last year." Jolene froze. "I have documentation showing Jolene Mercer manipulated quarterly results tied to the Sunview project in Phoenix. Internal forecasts were inflated. She doctored figures. Clayton has the originals." Clayton slid a folder across the table. Time-stamped emails, confirmed with server logs. Jolene's face went white. Dad snapped, "This isn't the time or place." "It's exactly the time," Diane said flatly. I stood slowly and passed out printed copies of my proposal. Effective immediately. I'm reinstating my full voting rights. Jolene will step down. Mercer Realty will issue a formal statement acknowledging falsified royalty filings, and Franklin will return 5% of grandfather's shares to Desmond, shares he was forced to forfeit under duress. Diane reviewed it all in silence, then said, "This is sound." Dad slammed his fist on the table. "She'll destroy this company." "Or rebuild it with actual integrity," Diane replied. A vote was set for the next morning at 9 a.m. As I stood to leave, I looked at my father and said, "Sleep well, Dad." The boardroom was colder than I remembered it. Maybe it was just me. At 9 a.m. sharp, Diane called the vote. Each member's voice echoed through the speaker. Yes, yes, yes. One abstained. That was enough. My proposal passed. Jolene's face didn't flinch, but her hand gripped the table like she was bracing for impact. She stood and left without a word. Franklin followed, slower, shoulders hunched. He didn't argue, didn't look back. I stood taller than I had in weeks, even with crutches under each arm. By noon, the press release went live. Mercer Realty admitted to oversight in filings and confirmed my reinstatement. Clayton watched it all unfold with a calm satisfaction. But even as my name appeared in the headlines, I didn't feel victorious, just intact. Desmond walked beside me as we exited the building. "You didn't just win, kid," he said. "You survived them." I gave a half smile. I'm still bleeding in places no one sees. That night, I returned to my apartment for the first time since the accident. It smelled like lavender and silence. I hadn't even taken off my coat when my phone buzzed. A voice message from Mom. I hesitated, then pressed play. "I hope you're proud of what you've done," she said, her voice clipped, emotionless. "You've torn this family apart." No apology, no remorse, just a final jab. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my old journal, flipping past pages written in hope, in disappointment, in pain. I wrote one line under today's date. I didn't tear us apart. I just stopped pretending we were ever whole. I placed Grandpa's framed photo back on the shelf, facing the window. Then I turned on my laptop. A message from a new investor blinked at the top of my inbox. I began typing. I used to think being quiet was safer, that if I just kept my head down and worked harder, someday someone would notice. That family, no matter how broken, still meant something solid. But I've learned that blood doesn't make you safe, and silence doesn't make you strong. Standing up for myself cost me a lot. The illusion of loyalty, the fantasy of a loving family. But what I gained was real. Truth, clarity, and for the first time, a future I chose, not one handed to me in pieces. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt erased, used, or underestimated, just know, your voice matters. Your worth isn't up for negotiation, not even with people who share your DNA. You don't owe anyone your peace just to keep them comfortable. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family to protect your peace? Do you think forgiveness always requires reconciliation? Let's talk about it in the comments. If this story moved you, if it hit somewhere deep, drop a 1 in the comments or just tell me what city or state you're watching from. I'd love to know. And if you're new here or you want more stories that speak truth, power, and healing, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps this channel keep telling real stories for real people. See you in the next one.
Hi, my name's Larissa, and my sister accused me of stealing her engagement ring at a family party in front of everyone. No warning, no proof. Just a lie that everyone was ready. But that wasn't the worst part. They kicked me out that same night. What they didn't know was I'd been paying their bills, their mortgage, her tuition, and when I stopped, their whole life unraveled. But now I wonder, was the ring ever about the ring? Or was it just their way of getting rid of me? What happens when the one holding everything together lets go? I arrived 10 minutes after it started. Not late enough to be rude, but late enough to be ignored. The house looked just as I remembered. White painted porch, fairy lights strung across the trees, A rented tent stretched over the backyard like a show of wealth that didn't come from work. I stepped out of my car, holding a slim envelope and a bottle of mid-shelf wine I'd picked up at a gas station on the way. My dress was simple, black, cotton, creased from the seatbelt. No one turned when I walked through the gate. Not my mother, who was too busy telling someone how Marla's fiancé worked in real estate, not sales. There's a difference. Not even Marla herself, who laughed loudly from the center of the crowd like she'd been waiting her whole life for this stage. A cousin I barely recognized asked if I was one of the caterers. I just smiled and moved toward the drink table. I was family. At least, I used to be. I poured myself a half glass of whatever was open and took a spot near the edge of the yard. They hadn't saved me a seat. They hadn't saved me anything. "Is that Larissa?" Someone muttered behind me, not whispering nearly enough. "It's fine," another voice said. "She's just here for the pictures." And I guess they were right. I stood there like part of the decor. Good lighting, soft smile, invisible. Marla wore white. Not cream, not ivory, full bridal white. The kind of dress that clung just enough to signal it was expensive, with sleeves that probably had a name. Her hand floated from guest to guest, flashing the diamond like a lighthouse. The ring was big enough to reflect fireworks, 3 stones, gold band, supposedly custom cut. Supposedly $7,500. She'd said it 3 times already. Loudly. When the guests quieted down enough to hear the clink of cutlery again, Marla raised her glass. "Before we get too tipsy," she said, pausing with her chin tilted like a news anchor, "I just want to ask one thing." I stood still. She looked directly at me. "Larissa, have you seen my engagement ring? The $7,500 one? You've been in my room a lot lately, haven't you?" Laughter. Nervous, scattered. My mouth opened. I didn't know what I was going to say yet, but I didn't get the chance. "Just kidding," Marla added quickly. "Unless—" "You have?" The sound died. No one laughed that time. Even the trees seemed to freeze. I set my glass down. It wobbled on the plastic table, almost tipped. I didn't. That wasn't a joke. That was bait. I moved inside, pretending I needed the restroom. The hallway was empty, but my face burned. I took a moment in the guest bathroom just to breathe, just to remember who I was. Then I washed my hands, fixed my hair, and walked out with the kind of fake confidence that people mistake for peace. The seating chart was taped to a corkboard by the door. I looked for my name. It wasn't on the family table, wasn't even on the second row. There it was. Bottom right. Larissa Skye, overflow table. I followed the label to a folding table near the back patio, next to 3 kids and 2 people I didn't recognize. One was wearing a polo shirt with the catering company's name embroidered on the chest. I sat without a word. Someone passed me a napkin and said, "You're so brave for showing up." I didn't ask what they meant. I didn't want to know. Instead, I watched Marla from across the garden. I watched our father raise a toast in her name. I watched our mother beam like the ring on Marla's finger was a crown. And I thought, for the 1,000th time, you can carry a family for years, and they'll still act like you're lucky to be invited. The sky turned dark without ceremony. The lights turned warmer. People began to dance. I stayed seated. Later, when most of the crowd had either left or wandered inside for coffee and leftover cake, I slipped into the house to grab my coat. I knew exactly where I left it, on the hook by the stairwell, always out of the way. That's when I heard her voice. "She's just jealous," Marla whispered, laughing too softly to sound kind. "She always has been." A friend responded, louder. "You think she'd really do it?" Marla paused, then said, "Honestly, I hope she did. Then we'll finally have a reason to push her out." My hand hovered on the doorknob. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. They didn't need proof. They never did. All they needed was someone easy to blame. I didn't walk away right away. I stood there, behind the half-closed door, listening to them talk about me like I'd already been tried, sentenced, and tossed out. They didn't whisper. They didn't lower their voices. Because why would they? I wasn't someone worth hiding cruelty from. I was the practice target before the real performance. I slipped on my coat, my hands cold, though the house wasn't. By the time I stepped back outside, the party had settled into that late evening lull. Music still playing, lights glowing warm against the dark, people laughing in clusters. But the air had changed, and when I stepped near the patio, I felt it. A silence. That slow, heavy kind, the kind that arrives just before something cruel. Marla was the one who broke it. "Can I have everyone's attention for just a moment?" she called out, voice too bright to be casual. Glasses stopped midair. Forks paused, heads turned. "I didn't want to say anything earlier," she said, resting her hand delicately on her chest, like a pageant queen mid-apology. "But something important has come up. My engagement ring. It's missing," a few people murmured. "And the last person seen near my room," she continued, letting the sentence hang like bait, "was Larissa." She didn't point. She didn't have to. They all looked. I stood there with nothing but a coat and the pit of my stomach tightening. "I'm not saying anything for sure," she added, lips tight. "But it's strange, isn't it?" Someone actually stepped back from me, like I carried something contagious. My mother stood stiffly beside Marla, saying nothing. And then my father, Warden Kelso, the man who taught me to drive, who once made pancakes when I had the flu in 6th grade, cleared his throat. He didn't look at me, he just said, flat and final, "Get out, tonight." The words didn't hit like bricks. They landed more like water, slow at first, then drowning. I opened my mouth, closed it. There was no point asking for a chance to speak. The trial had already been held, the verdict delivered. My sentence? Silence. I turned, walked inside. No one followed. Upstairs, my room was still the same. Twin bed, old posters. A framed photo of the three of us from a church Easter event still hung on the wall. I didn't stop to look at it. I packed slowly. A few clothes, my charger, the earrings my grandmother gave me when I was 15. I didn't bother with anything that couldn't fit in a single bag. My suitcase clicked shut too loudly in the quiet. On the way back down, I passed the kitchen. A family friend, Mrs. Turner, someone who used to babysit us, stood there with a napkin in hand. She extended it toward me like I was bleeding. "You'll figure it out," she said. Not, "I believe you." Not, "This is wrong," just that. I walked past her, past the dining room filled with half-empty wine glasses and leftover lemon bars, past the fireplace where my baby photos used to be. I didn't look to see if they were still there. Outside, the air had turned colder. A storm must have been rolling in. The wind carried the edge of rain, and I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't care. A light flickered on across the street, someone watching. I kept walking. My car sat parked beneath the big magnolia tree that had always dropped sap on the windshield. I tossed my bag in the back seat and sat behind the wheel. For a moment, I just sat there, breathing, not crying. My phone buzzed. A message from Marla. "Don't come back. Ever." No punctuation, just fact. I didn't read the rest. I deleted it without a second thought. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. The house glowed soft behind me, and for a second, it looked like a memory I used to love. A second was enough. The rain started 10 minutes into the drive, light at first, then harder, the kind that makes everything outside blur like smudged ink. My headlights cut through it, but the road ahead looked like nowhere. Red light. I stopped. My hands were still trembling. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, as if that would keep the doubt from crawling in. My coat was damp at the cuffs. My throat felt hollow. I unlocked my phone and opened the app I hadn't looked at in weeks. The joint account. It still had my name on it. Still showed the automatic payments I'd set up 2 years ago when Mom couldn't figure out how to manage QuickBooks, and Dad wasn't the tech type. Their mortgage, their utility bills, Marla's school payments, the entire household. held together by my silence. I stared at the screen. Then I tapped. Freeze account. A confirmation popped up. I pressed yes. That was it. No sound, no confetti. Just a pause. And the realization that they'd built a world off my labor and never once thought I'd stop. They erased me in one night. I'll show them what that costs. The room I was in didn't belong to me, but that morning, it felt more like home than the one I'd just left behind. I hadn't slept much, not because of noise or discomfort, but because stillness has a way of waking the parts of you you've been trying to ignore. Light crept through the sheer curtains of Mia's guest room. A quiet kind of gray morning, overcast but not gloomy. My bag sat untouched in the corner, still zipped shut. I hadn't unpacked anything, not because I thought I'd be leaving soon, because I didn't know what I wanted to hold on to. Mia had left a note on the fridge, just 6 words scrawled in purple ink. Help yourself. You don't owe anyone an explanation. She didn't press, didn't dig, didn't treat me like a rescue case. That silence felt like grace. I poured a cup of the coffee she'd brewed before leaving for work, sat at the little kitchen table, and opened my laptop out of habit. No reason, just muscle memory. I wasn't looking for comfort. I wasn't looking for clarity. I think I just needed to face the proof of things I already suspected. My inbox was flooded with the usual clutter, subscription deals, alerts from the electric company I no longer paid for. I scrolled lazily until a subject line stopped me cold. Temporary cosign, promise. It was dated 2 years ago from Irma. Not mom, not anymore. I clicked. Once we're approved, we'll remove your name from the loan. You'll never be liable. It's just a formality, sweetie. I'd never put you in that position. You know that. The email sat there like it had been waiting to slap me across the face. I opened a separate browser window and logged into the loan account. It took me 3 password resets. I hadn't touched it since helping her file the paperwork. Still active. Still listed under my name. Still showing a $42,000 balance. No changes had been made, not one. So I sat with that. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just stared at the screen until the words turned fuzzy. She'd looked me in the eye, patted my cheek, and said, I would never let this hurt you. And she did it anyway. No hesitation, no follow-through, just used me. She lied while holding my face in her hands. I whispered aloud. It wasn't for effect. There was no one to hear it. I closed the tab. I couldn't sit anymore. I got up, walked to the window, and watched a dog walker pass by on the sidewalk below. Normal life still happened. People still jogged, still stopped for red lights, still waved at neighbors. The world didn't pause just because your mother decided you were disposable. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message request on social media, from someone I hadn't seen since high school. Cassie Meyer. We'd had biology together sophomore year. Ate lunch at the same table for about 2 months. Then life moved on, and so did we. The message was short. I saw your name in a thread. Marla did this to me too. Can I share something? I tapped accept. Your sister framed me for shoplifting during junior year. She slipped a pair of earrings into my backpack at Claire's and walked away. I got caught, got suspended. She laughed when they pulled the footage, said it was a joke. No one believed me. My stomach didn't drop. It locked into place. I asked, why didn't you say something then? Cassie replied almost immediately. Because who would have believed me? Your family was respected. She was golden. And I was background. I didn't know what to say back. So I didn't. But I knew. The ring wasn't the first time. It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. One that had worked for her for years. Because she knew no one would question the daughter they'd already decided was flawless. She didn't just lie. She rehearsed it. She practiced on other people. And now I was just the latest canvas she painted guilt on. I walked back to the kitchen and topped off my coffee. The bitterness tasted honest. I opened a blank email draft. Cassie's message echoed in my mind. Not just her words, but the space between them. No one believed me, but that didn't mean I was wrong. I didn't hit send, not yet. Instead, I opened my Notes app and typed something else. Something only for me. They raised her like a diamond and treated me like a receipt. I closed the app. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to beg. They thought keeping the truth quiet meant it never happened. But receipts, real ones, don't vanish. They keep records. The decision had already been made. There was no going back after I tapped that screen. I didn't second-guess myself, not even for a second. But there's a strange kind of silence that follows a moment like that, like cutting the last wire to a house and waiting for the lights to flicker out. The morning 2 days later started just like the one before it. Same coffee, same borrowed robe, same quiet hum of the old fridge in Mia's apartment. She was already out the door by the time I shuffled into the kitchen. Her usual note was there, stuck to the toaster. Take whatever you need, don't apologize for being here. I didn't feel like a guest anymore, but I still couldn't bring myself to open her fridge without hesitation. It's strange what stays with you, like asking permission for a home you no longer had. I took my coffee to the table and flipped open my laptop. Not for work, not for distraction. I had a task. I went straight to the folder labeled Family Finances, the one they never knew I kept. It wasn't out of spite when I started it years ago. Back then, it felt like duty. Something I did because nobody else could be bothered. The spreadsheet was color-coded. Pink for mortgage, blue for Marla's tuition, green for utilities. It read like a blueprint of everything I'd held together behind the scenes. Each entry had dates, recurring payments, confirmation numbers. I hovered my mouse over the first auto transfer and clicked Cancel, then the next. I didn't slam the keys. I didn't curse. I just did what I needed to do. I wasn't just their daughter. I was their bookkeeper, their problem solver, their silent pillar. And now, I was their absence. By the time the sun had climbed halfway over the skyline, I had dismantled every financial string that tied me to that house. I sat back in my chair and waited, not with anxiety, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had finally turned off a machine she'd been forced to keep running. The next day, the notifications came like clockwork. Electricity shutoff scheduled for 48 hours due to failed payment. Overdue tuition notice from the university portal. Mortgage alert, payment canceled, contact your lender. I watched them pile into my inbox like junk mail, but this time, I didn't feel buried by it. I felt released. Mid-morning, my phone buzzed. An email from Irma. No greeting, no subject line. Just 5 words in the body. Fix this. Lena has class tomorrow. I stared at it for a full minute. No, hello. No, are you okay? Not even a question mark. I closed the tab without replying. The next ping was from the gas company. Their account had defaulted. I'd set up that autopay the month Dad forgot to do it during a cold snap. I remember him saying, "You're better at this kind of thing anyway. Just take care of it." They love to hand me messes like they were gifts. I stood from the kitchen chair and stretched. My shoulders didn't ache like they used to. I walked to the window, coffee in hand, and watched the street below come to life. People with somewhere to be, with lives that didn't orbit around pleasing the unpleasable. Mia came home early that afternoon. She walked in carrying groceries, glanced at my face and said, "You look like you just dropped 100 pounds. I smiled. I guess I did. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a bag of oranges and said, "Squeeze these into something good." Later that evening, I lit a candle and pulled out the small leather journal I hadn't touched in months. The first page was blank. I wrote, "They used me like I was invisible, so I made sure they'd feel what it's like when I'm gone." I didn't write it for drama. I wrote it for documentation, because if they wanted a trail, I'd give them one. Around 8:47 p.m., my phone lit up. Dad. I let it ring. Then came the message. "Sophia says she can't register for spring. What's going on? Talk to me." It was always like that with him. The demand disguised as concern. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat on the balcony. The sky was starting to spit a soft drizzle, the kind that didn't soak you, but made everything quieter. I watched it for a while before pulling my blanket around my shoulders and closing my eyes. They thought I was still on standby, ready to swoop in, make calls, settle bills, smooth the chaos. But the truth, they forgot something important. Even the best manipulators overlook who's been holding the plug the whole time. By the time I finished my second cup of coffee, the rain had stopped, but the air still held that unsettled stillness, like the sky hadn't made up its mind about whether it was done being angry. I opened the blinds in Mia's kitchen just enough to let in the morning light, then walked back to the table where my laptop waited. I didn't need a to-do list. I already knew where to start. A thick envelope sat beside my computer. I had picked it up from the mailbox the day before, but hadn't opened it yet. Something about the return address, Regency Lending Services, felt like a warning wrapped in a polite font. I slid my finger under the seal, unfolded the tri-fold letter inside, and skimmed. Then I stopped skimming. The letter was a reminder that the loan my name had been used for, $42,000 even, was now past due. And I, Larissa Skye, remained the sole responsible party on the account. According to their records, there had never been a request to remove me. Not even an inquiry. I sat there staring at that piece of paper, like it had just told me a secret everyone else already knew. 18 months ago, I'd been sitting at the kitchen counter when Irma, my mother, though lately the word didn't sit right, slid the documents toward me. "It's just a formality, sweetie," she'd said, her voice soft. "We can't get approved without a cosigner, but once it goes through, we'll take you off right away. You know I'd never put that on you." I remember the way she squeezed my hand, the way she smiled like she meant it, and I remember the voice in my head whispering, "You know better, but I signed anyway." Because daughters don't say no, not when their mothers look tired. The thing is, she hadn't been tired. She'd been prepared. And now, I was on the hook for a loan I didn't spend, didn't ask for, and didn't benefit from. They used my name like it was a tool, and then they discarded it. I folded the letter neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it inside the folder I'd started building, labeled Contingency Ridge Account. As I was about to close my laptop, a notification popped up on my phone, a direct message, from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Calla Witt, Marla's old friend, former best friend, the same Calla who'd been mysteriously uninvited from the bridal party 6 weeks ago. Her message started simply, "Hey, I know this might be weird, but I think you need to see this." I paused, then scrolled down. A screenshot followed, a conversation, between her and Marla. It was dated 4 days before the engagement party. Marla: "I swear I stuck the ring box in Larissa's drawer. Dad will flip, it's gonna be beautiful." Calla wrote beneath it, "I didn't understand what she meant until I saw your name trending in a TikTok thread. I'm sorry, I should have said something sooner." I reread it. Then again. I stared at the screen until my hands started to tremble. There it was. The thing they never thought I'd have. Proof. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. Something colder settled in me. This wasn't about clearing my name. This was about ending the performance. I opened my email and pulled up a draft addressed to Elowen Knox, my former college roommate, and now a civil attorney with a spine made of case law. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but I knew she'd answer. I attached the screenshot. In the body of the message, I wrote, "Subject: for legal review, character defamation and academic integrity concern, Charleston University student Marla Ridge." Then I hit send. No shaking hands this time, just certainty. I opened my Ridge folder and began sorting. Every receipt, every transfer log, every auto payment cancellation. I wasn't just saving files. I was building a timeline, not for court, not yet, but for me, so that when they said, "We didn't know," I could say, "You didn't care to." Just as I closed the lid of my laptop, I heard Mia's voice from the other room. "Larissa," she said, walking toward the kitchen, phone in hand. "Your mom just showed up. She's on my Ring camera. You want me to let her in?" I stood, walked slowly to the front window. Sure enough, Irma stood at the base of the porch steps, holding a folder, tight against her chest, like it was some kind of shield. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even trying to look apologetic. She was pacing, jaw clenched, waiting. I didn't open the door, didn't wave. I just turned and walked back to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and opened my laptop again. They taught me to be loyal. They never taught me to protect myself from them. So now, I'd show them what self-preservation looks like. The knock never came. Irma didn't try again. I waited, just in case, expecting maybe a second round, a louder plea, some kind of emotional Hail Mary. But none of that happened. Eventually, I watched her disappear from the Ring camera, folder still pressed against her chest like she was the one being wronged. I didn't follow her. Instead, I pulled up my email and opened the folder labeled Evidence. That word had a weight now, heavier than memory, more permanent than forgiveness. The next morning, I heard from Elowen. She didn't waste time with small talk. I watched the video, she said, her voice as even as always. This isn't some offhand comment. This is character defamation, intentional, planned. I sat in Mia's living room, laptop balanced on my thighs, listening as Elowen laid out the next steps, like we were reviewing a project brief. It was comforting in a strange way, how calm she was, how clinical. She forwarded the file to me. I opened it. The clip was grainy, pulled from someone's phone screen during a Zoom call, but the audio was clear enough. Marla's voice cut through, bright and smug. She's always been so passive, Marla was saying, laughing. Let's see how passive she looks when Dad throws her out. There were a few chuckles, the kind people do when they don't know if they're supposed to laugh or run. Then another voice chimed in. Calla's. Hesitant. That's a little harsh, don't you think? Marla laughed again. Please, she needs to learn. Maybe then she'll stop acting like she's better than the rest of us. I didn't blink. Submit it, I told Elowen. She was quiet for a beat. Then, you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. I sat with that silence for a moment longer, letting the words sink deeper into the cracks they'd made in me. But this time, there was no pain, only clarity. By noon, I was at Mia's table again, watching the clouds shift. The city was quieter than usual, or maybe my thoughts were finally louder than the world around me. I hadn't heard from anyone in my family since Irma left the porch. That changed at 3:42 p.m. Another knock, softer this time. Mia looked at me. Same car as yesterday, she said. You want me to open the door? I shook my head and stood. When I opened the door, Irma was already speaking. Larissa, she said, almost out of breath, like the steps to the porch had winded her. I'm not here to fight, I need a minute. She held up the manila folder again. It's everything, the receipts, the payments, the timeline. I wanted you to know we didn't mean for this to blow up like it did. I stared at her. You're a week too late, I said. She hesitated, eyes flicking to the folder. You sent that video to the school, didn't you? I didn't answer. She shifted her weight, her voice dropping. You're ruining your sister's life. That was the part that got me. Not because it hurt, because it was so familiar. That knee-jerk defense of Marla, the framing of everything as someone else's fault, the refusal to look inward, to admit there was rot in the foundation long before I stopped holding up the beams. No, I said calmly. She did that herself. I just recorded the credits. Irma's jaw tensed. She's not perfect, Larissa. None of us are. I never expected perfection, I said. I expected decency. A car drove by on the street behind her. She flinched like she was afraid someone might recognize her. You sent it to the university, she repeated. When was the last time you asked me what I needed? I asked her instead. That was the moment it cracked. Her hands, still holding the folder, began to tremble. Not violently, just enough that the paper inside rustled. She didn't answer. She stepped back, down one stair. Then another. Then she turned and walked to her car without looking back. I didn't close the door right away. I just stood there, watching the space where she'd stood. The weight of everything that had gone unspoken between us hung heavier than the humidity in the air. Later that night, after dinner, I opened my laptop again. Ilawan had sent a follow-up. Charleston University had acknowledged receipt of the materials. The hearing was scheduled. I closed my laptop, leaned back in the chair, and opened my journal. On the first blank page, I wrote, "I wasn't loud. I was legal." It didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like the first step of walking away clean. Just as I put the pen down, my phone buzzed. New message. Urgent. Charleston University, disciplinary hearing, 9 a.m. Friday. I let the screen light fade before turning it face down on the table. For once, it was going to be Marla under the spotlight. And this time, she wouldn't be able to talk her way out of it. The next morning, I woke before the sun. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because my mind had already moved on. There was no going back. Not emotionally, not strategically. The hearing was 2 days away, and I'd already stopped needing anything from them. But something deeper had shifted. At 9 a.m., I met Ilawan at a small coffee shop tucked between a dry cleaner and a florist on King Street. It was quiet, not trendy. The kind of place where the regulars don't make eye contact unless they've seen you 3 times. She was already there when I arrived. 2 coffees in and 3 folders laid out across the table, like we were meeting to discuss a joint venture. Not the unraveling of a family's illusion. "I'm glad you came in person," she said, sliding one of the folders toward me. Inside, screenshots, bank statements, timeline charts, school policy codes, and a highlighted copy of the conduct manual. At the bottom of the pile was a letter addressed to Charleston University's disciplinary board, signed and sealed. "Here's what we're submitting. Witness testimony, financial conflict, intent to defame. It's solid." I stared at the stack, then back at her. "I'm not trying to ruin her," I said. My voice was calm, measured. Ilawan didn't flinch. "I know. I don't need to see her collapse. I just need people to stop pretending she's a victim. This isn't about destruction," she said. "It's about truth. Once that lands, the rest isn't yours to carry." I nodded. But something still sat in my chest like a stone. Unfinished business I couldn't name yet. We wrapped up within the hour. On the way back to Mia's, I stopped for gas. My phone buzzed just as I popped the cap. Unknown number, voicemail. I listened before I even pulled away from the pump. "Larissa, it's May. I heard about what's happening from a friend at the church. I know we haven't spoken in years, but I think you deserve to know something." I froze. Aunt May. My mother's older sister, the one who left town after some fight no one would talk about. The voicemail was short, but I didn't delete it. I played it 3 times. Then I called her back. She answered on the second ring. "I've been waiting for this," she said. "Your mother never told you, did she?" "Told me what?" "That ring Marla's parading around like a trophy? It was never hers. It was your grandmother's. Your mother told her it was a new design, but it's not. She gave it to Marla after promising it to you." The silence on my end said more than I ever could have said out loud. "She erased you," May said softly, "from history, from memory, from every piece of legacy that had your name on it." "I figured as much," I said, "but hearing it from you helps." There was a pause. Then May said, "I'm going to send you something." That evening, an email arrived. Attached. A scan of a handwritten letter. The penmanship was slanted but neat. At the top, my grandmother's name. At the bottom, Irma's. Larissa may be the youngest, but she carries more of us than she'll ever admit. She sees things the rest of us choose not to. I read it twice, then again. And again. Ilawan, who had stopped by to finalize the packet, leaned over my shoulder as I printed it. "That's your ring," she said. "Always was?" "They thought hiding it would rewrite the truth," I said. "But legacy has a longer memory than people do," she replied. I added the letter to the folder. Page 76. That night, just before bed, I received a tip from someone anonymous. The school board had already reviewed the evidence. Marla's advisor had withdrawn her name from the recommendation list. The scholarship she bragged about online? Suspended pending review. And then came the text from Silas. She says it's all a misunderstanding. I told her it looks more like a pattern. I stared at the message, then typed back. It was never hers. None of it was. And I meant every word. By the time the sun lifted over Charleston, the news had already outrun it. I was mid-sip of my coffee when the first email landed, then another, then 3 more. Subject line: Wedding for Marla Ridge and Silas Brandt, canceled. No explanation, no apology, just a single sentence beneath the header. This event has been removed from the schedule by the host. 300 people had received the same notice. Vendors, guests, a couple of sorority friends who'd already posted their outfits for the big day. I didn't smile. I didn't lean back and whisper, "Karma." I just closed the tab. Not because it didn't matter, but because it didn't need celebrating. Some fires burn so long you stop looking for the flame. 15 minutes later, Silas left me a voicemail. His voice was calm, steady, like a man speaking after he'd finally put something heavy down. She told me last night she wanted to come clean, he said. Said everything had gotten twisted, that people had misunderstood her. But I'd already seen the footage. I'd already read the texts. She wasn't misunderstood, Larissa. She was just good at pretending. I saved the voicemail. Not because I needed proof, because I wanted a reminder of what real truth sounded like when spoken plainly. By mid-afternoon, my phone felt like it was humming in my palm. Notification after notification. Kala had posted the clip, the full recording, the bridal Zoom call, the screen capture of Marla's message about planting the ring, screenshots, transcripts, all of it. She didn't tag me, didn't add commentary, just posted with the caption, "This is what it looks like when the scapegoat tells her story." It went viral within hours. Justice for Larissa was trending. I got over 500 messages that day, strangers, former classmates. One woman from my college dorm messaged, "I always wondered why you disappeared sophomore year. I'm sorry for not asking then." But it was one message that I read over and over. "You gave me the courage to speak out too." It was from a girl I didn't recognize. Different town, different family, same pattern. It hit me harder than anything else had. Not the cancellation, not the scandal, not even Silas walking away. But that message, that someone else saw themselves in my silence. I opened my notes app and began to write. Just one sentence. You don't have to fight for space in a family that builds walls instead of tables. I sat with it for a long while. The words staring back at me like a mirror I finally felt brave enough to hold. But I never posted it. Some things don't need to be public to be true. Later that evening, I logged into my bank account and initiated the final transfer. I moved every cent from the frozen joint account, my money, my contributions, into a brand new personal account I'd opened 3 days ago. No names attached but mine. I watched the screen confirm the balance, watched it settle like a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. And then I closed the laptop and sat on the balcony, letting the night wrap around me like a coat I'd earned. Charleston's skyline was quiet, the sky clear. Lights blinked from windows across the neighborhood, people finishing dinner, getting ready for bed, folding laundry, watching news. Normal life, something I hadn't allowed myself to crave in years. That's when the doorbell rang. Mia looked at me from the kitchen, one brow raised. "It's your dad," she said quietly. "He's alone." I didn't move at first, not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted to be sure I wasn't moving from habit. Eventually, I stood, walked to the door, and paused. I didn't open it. Instead, I stood just behind the wood and said, clear and calm, "I'm not here to fix anything anymore. I'm here to live." Silence. Then the sound of footsteps retreating. I waited until I heard the car pull away before I stepped back, locked the deadbolt, and returned to the balcony. The sky hadn't changed, but I had. 3 weeks had passed since I closed that door. Not just the one my father stood behind, but every door they had ever left cracked open, just wide enough to pull me back in. Savannah was different. It had a slower heartbeat than Charleston, less interested in appearances, and more comfortable with quiet. I'd found a third-floor walk-up near a park where people walked their dogs before work and waved like they meant it. The kind of neighborhood where no one knew your last name or your family's reputation. I passed the old Ridge House on my last trip back to collect some paperwork I needed for the LLC. It was listed now. For sale, staked in the front lawn, the kind printed on corrugated plastic and jammed into the soil without ceremony. The garden was overgrown, grass tall around the steps. No balloons, no guests. No more staged brunches with name cards and fake laughter. For the first time, it looked exactly like it had always felt to me. Beautiful and empty. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. Just kept walking, keys in my pocket, folder under my arm. The sound of my own steps keeping time with how far I'd come. They never called. No voicemail from Irma. No email from Warden. Not even a text from Marla. Not even when the hearing was over. Not even when the board issued their ruling. Academic probation, suspension of all leadership roles, public reprimand. They didn't ask what I said. They didn't ask what I didn't. And somehow, that silence felt honest. We were no longer pretending. I used to think apologies were the gold standard of closure, that if I could just get them to say the words, "I'm sorry, we were wrong, you mattered," then I'd feel whole again. But somewhere between freezing the bank account and printing the final exhibit for the university, I stopped waiting for anyone to hand me healing like a gift. An apology is a transaction, and I wasn't looking to be paid anymore. I was already building something that belonged to me. My new place wasn't big. 2 rooms and a kitchen, a balcony that overlooked a row of oak trees in the brick back of a bakery. But it was mine. Every rent check, every plant on the sill, every shelf I installed without asking anyone's opinion. I opened my laptop every morning at 8:00 sharp. Not for emails from family, but for work. I'd been hired by a nonprofit that taught financial literacy to women rebuilding after divorce, abuse, estrangement. I understood the terrain. I'd lived in it. And on Thursday nights, I recorded a video series from my kitchen table called The Daughter They Forgot to Thank. I didn't cry in those videos. I didn't rant. I just told the truth. Stories of growing up useful instead of loved, of being the family safety net until it tore, of learning the difference between loyalty and servitude. The comments were steady. No trolls. Just people who saw themselves in the spaces I left between words. One woman wrote, "You didn't just survive. You redesigned the entire blueprint." I read that one a few times. It made me smile, just once. Not the kind you paste on for pictures. The kind that feels like it comes from deep in the ribs, like it belongs there. That weekend, I opened the envelope that had been sitting unopened on my desk for days. My LLC papers, approved, sealed, filed. Sky Solutions. A name I gave myself. A name I earned. I watered the plants, made coffee, let the sun find my shoulder through the open window. Then I opened my journal. Last page. I used to beg them to see me, I wrote. Now, I build rooms where people like me are seen first. I didn't need an audience to make it matter. I didn't need a courtroom or a kitchen table full of family. I needed exactly what I had. Peace that didn't come cheap, but came clean. A knock came once, about a week after the wedding had been called off. I didn't answer it. Didn't even look. Some things don't need to be reopened to be resolved. I didn't win, but I walked away, and that was more than they ever gave me. "Hi there, I'm Beatrix." My sister banned me from her wedding, said being a plumber didn't fit the image. They used the house I renovated, the pipes I fixed, the work I gave without thanks. Then pretended I didn't exist. But what happens when the person you erase stops fixing what you keep breaking? You want to know how their big day fell apart? Let me show you. It was the kind of summer heat that made your clothes stick and your patience run thin. I was standing in the middle of my cousin's backyard in Naperville, holding a paper plate stacked with lukewarm potato salad, watching the condensation drip off a red Solo cup in my other hand. The grill was going. Someone had a country playlist running too loud through a dented Bluetooth speaker, and a few kids were already crying near the inflatable bounce house. It was the usual family cookout. Same crowd, same faces, same jokes that hadn't aged well. I was debating whether the deviled eggs had been sitting out too long when I heard my name. "Hey, Beatrix!" It was my cousin Lorna, coming in from the patio, sunglasses perched on her head like she hadn't changed since high school. She waved a beer bottle at me. "You gonna be early to fix the pipes before the big day, or what?" I blinked. The laugh that followed from a few people nearby wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was casual, easy, like what she said didn't sting at all. Like I wasn't the one who'd stayed late last Christmas to unclog Aunt Reenie's sink, or the one who rerouted Mom's entire bathroom plumbing during the pandemic, just because she didn't want strangers in the house. But sure, I was just the family plumber, the help. I looked over toward my mother, who had caught the comment. She smiled gently and turned back to the pasta salad, didn't say a word. I gave Lorna a polite half smile. "Well," I said, "depends on if the venue's got hot water or not." She laughed again, oblivious, and drifted off toward the cooler. It wasn't the words that did it. It was the ease of them, like my presence, my work, everything I'd given, had become invisible. Later that week, I came home from a long job patching a burst water main in Aurora. My back was aching, and my hands were still red from the heat when I saw the envelope on my kitchen counter. Off-white cardstock, gold trim. I already knew. The wedding invitation. I opened it slowly, not because I expected anything, but because I was afraid of what I already suspected. It wasn't addressed to Beatrix Monroe, sister of the bride. No. My name appeared in a small, thin font on the bottom half of the second page, under a section titled Staff Assistants, Vendor Notes. Vendor. Not guest. Not family. Vendor. At first, I thought it was a mistake, some clerical thing. Maybe someone sent the wrong file to the printer. But when I called to ask, just to clarify, Jocelyn's voice was breezy. "Oh, don't take it the wrong way," she said. "We just grouped folks by function, you know? You're good at things, and we didn't think you'd mind." I didn't say anything. I just stood there holding the phone, letting the silence stretch. I heard her sigh. "It's not like we didn't invite you," she added, with that familiar tone of faux kindness she used when she borrowed my tools without asking. I ended the call with a short, "Okay," not because I agreed, but because I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of hearing how fast my heart was racing. That night, I didn't eat. I didn't sit on the couch. I just stared at the card, now pinned to my fridge with a cracked magnet. Vendor, staff assistants. It stayed up for 3 days. On the 4th, I walked to the fridge, peeled it off slowly, and laid it flat on the table. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just whispered aloud. "So that's how they see me." No one noticed that I didn't show up to help with the backyard decorations the following weekend. No one asked why I didn't text back in the family group chat about the floral arrangements. And for the first time since we were kids, I didn't swing by Mom's to fix the dripping hose or replace the broken porch light. It wasn't spite. It was a quiet kind of pulling back, like when you stop watering a plant that never belonged to you in the first place. The shift was slow, but it was real. That Sunday, after my grocery run, I walked into the kitchen, dropped my keys in the bowl, and opened the drawer under the microwave. There, tucked between old coupons and a roll of duct tape, was a small silver box. Inside it was the wedding gift I'd bought for Jocelyn months ago. A custom-engraved French press, something elegant and expensive, the kind of thing she'd show off on Instagram with a fake humble caption like, "So blessed." I held it for a moment. Then I turned, opened the trash bin, and dropped it inside, lid and all. It made a soft thud. satisfying in a way I hadn't expected. By Monday evening, I'd already forgotten the weight of the trash can lid closing. I cooked a quick dinner, nothing special, just sautéed vegetables over rice, and sat at the edge of my couch, phone in hand, scrolling through Instagram stories out of habit more than interest. Most were harmless: dog videos, workout selfies, someone's homemade lasagna. But then a photo stopped me cold. It was a group shot. My mother, Jocelyn, and a few of our aunts and cousins gathered around a table at what looked like a restaurant. There were pastel gift bags in the background and a floral sign that read, "Rehearsal ready." Champagne flutes sparkled, everyone tagged. Except me. I tapped through again just to be sure. Still no tag, no mention, no text invite, nothing. Something about that photo dug deeper than I expected. Not because I wanted to be there, God knows I didn't, but because they didn't even pretend to want me there. I opened another app and searched the name of the restaurant printed on the backdrop, one of those trendy farm-to-table places with overpriced wine flights. After 2 redirects, I found the number for their events coordinator and called. "Hi," I said, forcing a light tone. "I was just checking on a guest list for an upcoming wedding dinner this Friday, the Monroe Trask party." The woman on the phone was polite, clicking away on her keyboard. "Let me pull that up." "Okay, yes, we have them here. Who are you looking for?" "Beatrix Monroe." A pause. Then, "Sorry, I'm not seeing that name. Are you sure you're on the list?" I let out a short breath. "Guess not." She apologized, not knowing what for. I thanked her and hung up. I sat there for a while, the silence in my apartment suddenly louder. The fridge hummed. A delivery truck rattled by outside. I stared at the pale light on the ceiling and wondered, had I really expected anything different? Eventually, I picked up the phone and called my mother. She answered on the second ring with that rehearsed warmth she reserved for church ladies and bank tellers. "Hi, sweetheart, everything okay?" "I just had a quick question," I said evenly. "Is there a rehearsal dinner this Friday?" Another pause. "Oh, yes. Just a small thing for the family. Jocelyn didn't want to make it a big deal." "I wasn't invited." She sighed, like the conversation was inconvenient, not hurtful. "Honey, you're always working out of town. We didn't want to burden you. It's easier this way." That phrase again. Easier this way. Like my presence was a logistical problem they'd finally solved. "You didn't think to ask?" I pressed, my voice still steady. She chuckled softly, like I was being overly sensitive. "You know how Jocelyn is. Everything's planned to the minute, and you're so independent. I figured you'd rather skip the chaos." No apology, no regret. Just a casual rewrite of reality where they weren't being cruel. They were being practical. I ended the call shortly after, claiming I had a client hold on the other line. I didn't. I just couldn't listen to her make it sound like exclusion was some kind of favor. Later that night, I stepped outside to the small lot where I park my work truck. The air smelled like cut grass and old pavement. I unlocked the back, pulled open the panel, and reached for my toolbox. It wasn't dirty. I cleaned it every Friday like a ritual. Still, I wiped it down again, my fingers lingering on the initials I'd scratched into the corner years ago. BM, in all caps. I didn't cry. I just stood there thinking, they didn't forget me. I'm just the piece they don't need to rehearse around. Back inside, I made tea and sat in front of my laptop, where an email from a client waited. An urgent pipe refitting scheduled for the same weekend as the wedding. I stared at it a moment before hitting delete. Then I opened the group chat labeled Monroe Family Plus and removed myself. One by one, I backed out of the other threads. Jocelyn's bridal shower group, the Just Girls thread, even the family holiday planning chat. No announcement, no explanation, just quiet exits. It felt like slipping out the back door at a party no one noticed you came to. Before bed, I walked to the wall calendar hanging in the hallway outside my bedroom. The wedding date was still marked in neat blue ink, August 18th, circled with a little heart I'd added months ago before I knew better. I pulled the marker from the drawer, paused, then yanked the cap off. The heart vanished first, then the date. Then the whole square turned black under the pressure of the permanent ink. I stood there staring at the smudge, breathing in the scent of the marker like it was cleansing something deeper. I stood in the hallway a moment longer, watching that thick black square on my calendar, like it might blink first. It didn't. Eventually, I turned off the hall light and made my way to bed. Sleep came late, the kind where your body rests, but your mind chews everything to pieces. When the sun came through the blinds the next morning, I didn't feel rested, just sharper. I brewed a strong cup of coffee and sat at the counter, phone in hand, not even pretending to scroll aimlessly this time. I knew what I was looking for. Jocelyn's bridal party had been busy overnight. Photo after photo filled my feed, brunch at that rooftop bar downtown, gift bags with handwritten notes, a custom neon sign that read The Trasks. But it wasn't the champagne flutes or matching satin robes that got me. It was the background, brick walls, archway framed in ivy, the old oak tree by the side path. They were hosting the wedding at our childhood home. Not just any backyard bash. This was a full-blown event, complete with tents, lighting, and string quartets rehearsing in the grass I used to mow with a push-behind mower every Saturday before Dad passed. I clicked one photo, then another. My hands grew still. The caption read, "Family History, Heritage Charm, a venue full of love." Her best friend wrote under one picture, "It's giving Martha Stewart meets HGTV. Love when a house feels luxurious and lived in." Funny. I knew exactly which part of that floor had been replaced after a pipe burst under it, because I'd fixed it, alone. On a February weekend, 6 years ago, while everyone else was at some cousin's baby shower. I'd bought the new boiler when the old one cracked, called in favors to get it installed under budget, bled the pipes, resealed the crawl space, and hand-dug trenches when the ground was too frozen for machinery. No one offered to help. They just assumed I'd do it. And I did. I always did. Until now. I stared at the photos and read the captions again. Restored by the family. By the family. Not once did my name appear. Not even a shout-out in the comments. I was watching strangers sip wine on a porch I rebuilt, smile under a trellis I reinforced, toast under lights I wired. For a second, I laughed. It wasn't loud or bitter, just one of those dry exhales that comes out when the absurdity becomes too obvious to ignore. I opened my file cabinet, bottom drawer. Inside was a red accordion folder labeled House 405 Trillium. My handwriting. I flipped through receipts, scribbled measurements, copies of permits I pulled under my license. It was all there. Copper piping invoices, hardwood planks I bought out of pocket, even the delivery slip for the backup sump pump I installed after that flood warning in 2018. I hadn't just helped maintain that house. I'd made it livable. They used what I built, and now they were using it to host the one event I wasn't invited to. I found a blank invoice sheet tucked between two contractor quotes. It was outdated, from a job I'd long forgotten, but the format still worked. For a moment, I considered filling it out seriously. Labor hours, material costs, consultation time. The total came to just under $28,000. I smiled. Not because I intended to send it. No, that would be too easy, and it would make them the center again. Instead, I printed the invoice, folded it in thirds, and placed it under the magnet on my fridge. The one that says, "Just so I remember." I didn't need their credit. I didn't need Jocelyn to tag me in her carousel of filtered moments. I needed the truth, for myself. I left the folder open on the counter, the edges of the papers gently curling from time and air. I looked down at the invoice one more time. A house doesn't stay upright by accident. Someone holds the beams in place. Someone patches the leaks. Someone pays attention when no one else wants to. And they got to pretend it was a community project while pushing me to the margins. I closed the folder slowly and whispered to the quiet kitchen, "They get to pretend, but I remember." I left the folder on the counter, walked into the living room, and turned off the lamp. The apartment was dim, quiet. The kind of quiet that used to feel peaceful, but tonight it just felt full. Full of things unsaid, undone, unacknowledged. I wasn't angry, not in the usual way. I didn't feel hot or reckless. I felt precise. The next morning, I woke before my alarm and stayed in bed with the blinds still closed. My phone buzzed with the usual notifications, mostly ads, appointment reminders, and one Facebook memory. It was a picture from 4 years ago. Jocelyn had posted it back then, her sitting on the kitchen floor, red-eyed from crying, holding a mop and surrounded by water. Caption: "Pipe burst on a Sunday, bless this mess." In the background, half-blurred, crouched near the baseboard, was me, wrench in hand. Ponytail looped through the back of a ball cap. No one had tagged me. No one ever had. I clicked back to her current feed, and there it was. A fresh post from the wedding prep. A photo of the living room, decked out with vintage glassware and rented linens. The caption read, "This house has always been held together by love." Held together by what? That sentence hit harder than I expected. I got out of bed, walked into the bathroom, and sat on the edge of the tub. My eyes landed on the sink. Next to it, resting on the edge, was the same rust-stained wrench I'd used all those years ago. It hadn't moved far from my tool bag since. Not because it was broken, but because I always kept it close. I went back to the kitchen, pulled open the drawer under the microwave, and grabbed my phone. I hadn't opened Facebook in weeks, maybe months, but my password still worked. I took a photo. The wrench. A copper valve. A faint shadow from the window across the metal. No fancy filters. No story time. Just a caption. "Sometimes pressure is the only truth." I hit post. Then I closed the app. I didn't expect anything to happen, not really. It was just something I had to get out of me, like a slow exhale after holding your breath underwater for too long. I put my phone down, stepped into the garage, and opened my workbench drawer. I didn't have any jobs booked that day, and I wasn't in the mood to chase invoices. I wiped down a set of sockets, realigned a few ratchets, cleaned a level that hadn't seen daylight in months. Within 15 minutes, the notifications started. Ping, ping, ping. I let them come. I didn't check. I just kept working. At some point, the silence between the pings grew longer. Eventually, the noise stopped altogether. I stepped back inside to grab some water. As I passed by the counter, I glanced at the screen. Kimbra, the ever-loyal bridesmaid and Jocelyn's closest confidant, had commented a simple, "Ah?" That was it. No follow-up, no emojis. Just that small question mark, floating like a pebble in a still lake. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. I turned the phone face down and left it there. I wasn't looking for a fight. I wasn't aiming to ruin anything, but I also wasn't going to patch over a crack just because someone pretended not to see it. Back in the garage, I sat on the stool, the familiar scent of grease and pine shavings settling around me. My hands, finally still, rested on my knees. I thought about that phrase, held together by love, and I said out loud, just to the tools, to the workbench, to the walls that had never lied to me, if they don't like the sound of silence cracking, they shouldn't have made it this loud. That evening, as I heated up leftovers and watched condensation gather on the kitchen window, my phone buzzed again. A message from Jocelyn. 4 words. "Did you mean that post for me?" I let the screen dim without replying. I didn't sleep much that night. I didn't need to. My body had the kind of alertness that comes not from coffee or adrenaline, but from decision. The kind that makes you wake up before the sun without a trace of hesitation. I got dressed in old work pants and a flannel shirt I didn't mind sweating in, tied my hair back, and wheeled the industrial fan and backup lighting down the ramp from the garage into the truck bed. These were things I'd offered months ago, before the guest list came out, before I was erased from it. Back then, I was still part of the team, still the younger sister who could be relied on to make things function, to crawl under decks and check fuses when others were sipping mimosas. Now, I was just returning borrowed tools. Nothing more. By late morning, I pulled into the rear lot of the house, the same one I'd once wired for motion lights on my own dime. The wedding tent had already gone up on the back lawn, flapping gently in the breeze. White folding chairs lined the yard like little teeth. I parked by the utility shed and unloaded the dolly. As I rolled it toward the back steps, a young woman in all black, clipboard in hand, headset half tangled in her hair, stepped in front of me. "Excuse me," she said with a polite but firm tone. "Vendor entrance is around the side. You'll need to check in with the coordinator." I looked at her. She didn't know who I was. And that was fine. It meant I didn't have to explain. I nodded once, wordlessly, and pushed the dolly toward the gravel path leading to the side door. The wheels rattled with each step. My boots kicked up bits of mulch. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Inside the garage, I placed the fans in the designated corner. The lighting kits followed. I wrapped the cords neatly, the way I always did, and left a note on the box. Returned as promised. B. As I was exiting through the side hallway, I heard a familiar burst of laughter outside the open window. Low, deep voices, joking the way men do when they're dressed in matching suits and trying to hide their nerves. I didn't mean to look, but something in me turned toward the sound. That's when I saw him. Dre? He was standing near the refreshment table, holding a bottle of water, laughing at something someone else had said. His hand curled loosely at the neck, just like I remembered when he used to lean against my kitchen counter while I fixed his leaky pipes. He hadn't changed much. A little grayer at the temples, a bit of soft around the jawline, but still smug in a way only someone confident in forgetting you can be. He caught sight of me before I could turn away. Our eyes met. There wasn't shock on his face, more like a flicker of embarrassment, the kind that slips in when the person you underestimated walks in through a door you thought they'd never reach again. He stepped toward me. "B?" he said, trying for warmth that didn't reach his eyes. "Wow, you still do plumbing?" I tilted my head and gave him a look as neutral as a straight edge. "Do you still pitch other people's work as your own?" I asked calmly. His mouth opened slightly, but no words followed. I didn't stay long enough to see if he found any. I turned and kept walking. My footsteps on the wood floor felt solid, certain. I didn't need to slam a door or raise my voice. He could sit with that silence, just like I had. Passing by the main foyer, a catering cart rolled by, nearly brushing my shoulder. The staff member apologized quickly, eyes darting to my utility belt. "Oh, sorry. I thought you were one of the setup crew." I didn't correct her. I nodded again, gave a half smile, and walked on. Outside, the wind had picked up. The tent flaps rustled louder now. Somewhere behind me, I heard a voice whisper, "Hey, who was that?" And then another, just loud enough to carry on the breeze, answered, "I think she used to fix things." I didn't flinch. I kept walking down the gravel path, the crunch of each step steady, measured. My truck was waiting, my work was done. I drove back in the slow shade of afternoon. The gravel had long stopped crunching beneath my boots, but the sound echoed anyway, somewhere in my ribs. After unloading the last piece of equipment, I didn't hang around. No conversations, no glances back. Just the kind of exit you don't get thanked for, but you remember making. By the time I was home, the sun had ducked behind the line of oaks across the lake. I changed into a soft hoodie, poured a ginger beer over ice, and stretched out on the couch, legs tucked under me like I wasn't waiting for anything. I wasn't. I'd already given too many pieces of my time, my skill, my silence. That's when the first video landed in my inbox. It came from Paige, a cousin's friend who I hadn't spoken to since the last baby shower I was invited to, 3 years ago. Her message said, "Thought you'd want to see this. Wild." Attached was a 23-second clip. The frame was shaky, probably recorded with panic. Bridesmaids in pastel dresses were crowding a small hallway, fanning themselves, pointing toward the restroom door. Then a splash, Screams. One girl yelling, "It's backing up! It's coming up through the floor!" And right there, just a glimpse, but unmistakable, a toilet overflowing. Fast, ugly. The camera jerked. Someone dropped what looked like a clutch purse. And then the audio cut out as the phone's owner scrambled to stop recording. I blinked once, then again. I didn't smile, didn't sigh. Just reached for the remote and muted the television I hadn't been paying attention to. The silence was enough. Another ping. This time from a coworker. "Is this from your sister's wedding? People are tweeting about it." The link opened to a tweet with 2 blurry screenshots from what had to be the same scene. The caption read, "So, the bridal suite bathroom became Niagara Falls. Wet wedding, / plumbing fail." I didn't need the hashtag, because I remembered the warning I'd sent Jocelyn months ago. I'd left her a voice memo, professional, polite, even though I was seething beneath every word. I'd said, "The upper pipes need replacement, not patching. That seal won't hold under full use. You'll have 50 guests running water nonstop." Her reply never came. The only message that remained from her was the one before that, months earlier. "Thanks, but we're going with someone more event-friendly." Event-friendly. That meant shiny tools and clean uniforms, not someone who showed up with dirt under her nails and no patience for nonsense. That meant someone who wouldn't remind the family that a beautiful house wasn't magic, it was labor. Another ping. This time, it was a screenshot from a friend of a friend of a friend, an Instagram story already deleted, a shot of the bride's gown, wet at the hem. Captioned briefly, "So much for the fairy tale." I recognized the pattern on the tile floor. I installed that tile. Back then, I had stayed up 2 nights in a row laying each piece by hand because no one else could afford a contractor. That wedding was unraveling in the house I'd stitched together, and I wasn't even there to see it. I got up, walked into the kitchen, and opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle, twisted the cap, took a long drink. The lake outside the window had gone still, the surface like glass. A few ducks floated by in the reflection of the clouds. I didn't post anything, didn't gloat. I just let it happen. Somewhere, Kimbra had already deleted the video from her story, probably realized the bride didn't want more attention for the wrong reasons. There wouldn't be a statement. There wouldn't be an apology either. That would mean acknowledging the root of the problem. And everyone knew which pipe had burst. They just didn't want to say my name next to it. By 10, my phone had quieted again. No more pings, no new videos. But then, at 10:42 p.m., a voicemail. It was from my mother. Her voice was low, too low to be fake calm. There was no anger, just exhaustion. "Beatrix, something happened. The ceremony got interrupted, the plumbing. It caused a lot of trouble. Jocelyn's been crying for hours. We might need your help. If you're not too busy." That last part. If you're not too busy. As if I hadn't already been too busy to be included. I didn't hit play again. I didn't save the voicemail. I didn't even replay it for satisfaction. I just sat back down, pulled the blanket over my legs, and stared at the black screen of the TV. The room was still. No blinking lights, no buzzing interruptions. Just peace. I let the night swallow the silence. The screen on my phone dimmed again, then blacked out completely. My reflection flickered in it for a brief moment. Tired eyes, hair pulled back, face unbothered. I placed the phone face down on the side table, leaned into the couch cushion, and exhaled like I was shedding something I no longer owed anyone. It must have been past midnight when the next voicemail landed. I didn't rush to play it. I waited until I finished brushing my teeth, folding a load of laundry, and locking the back door. Only when I sat down again did I tap play. It was my mother's voice, heavy with something she wasn't used to carrying. Uncertainty. "Beatrix, it's late, I know. I wouldn't call if it weren't. Jocelyn's falling apart. She won't eat. She won't talk to anyone. We don't know what to do anymore. I know you said you're not part of this, but if there's anything you can do, please." The please was the sharpest part. Not because I hadn't heard it before, but because I could tell it cost her something to say it out loud. I didn't respond. I didn't delete the message either. I just let it sit there. The next morning, while pouring coffee, I opened my email. A headline from one of those local wedding blogs jumped out. Disaster at the Dales, what went wrong? The article didn't name names, but the photos did. People in pastel heels stepping over towels in the bridal suite. A shot of the front porch flooded out to the gravel. One photo caught my eye. A side shot of the electrical fan I'd dropped off weeks ago. Still labeled with my handwriting on the side. Still spinning. A few hours later, a friend texted me a screenshot from Facebook. A comment thread on a now-deleted post by the groom's aunt. I thought this venue had everything handled, but I heard the plumbing was donated? By someone in the family who didn't even attend? Another comment followed quickly. Beatrix, right? Then, wait, she wasn't invited? And just like that, the thread was gone. Deleted. But not before the truth trickled out. Like water from a pipe, no one bothered to check twice. I didn't chime in, didn't post, but something about the silence afterward felt different. Not mine. Theirs. Mid-afternoon, I received a text from Jocelyn. It was just one word. Why? No punctuation, no context. I stared at it for a while. Let it glow there while I watched the sun move across the living room rug. Then, 2 hours later, I replied. Because I was invited to do the work, not to belong. No emojis, no anger. Just a sentence I'd carried in my chest for years, finally released into daylight. She didn't answer. And I didn't wait for her to. The next day, as I was setting up a new tool rack in the shed, my phone vibrated again. But this time, it wasn't a family message. It was a reposted video. The same footage that had vanished earlier from Kimbra's story. Only now it had a caption added to it, bold white text across the bottom. She warned them. I tapped the volume. The scene played, screaming, water, chaos. In the background, someone's voice, maybe the DJ, saying, "Oh no, not again." I closed the app and put my phone in the pocket of my hoodie. Funny how truth has a way of circling back, even when you don't chase it, even when you're too tired to lift a finger. It seeps into the cracks they tried to cover, leaking louder with every attempt to ignore it. It wasn't my voice exposing them. It was their own oversight, shouting back in the form of consequence. The shed was quiet except for the occasional chirp of crickets echoing in from the trees behind the fence. I stayed out there long after dark, rearranging the drill bits, wiping down the table saw, organizing shelves that had never truly been disordered. There's a strange comfort in straight lines, and things that stay where you put them. Just as I was locking up, my phone buzzed again. I assumed it was another wedding blog headline, or some friend of a friend relaying the latest online reaction to the plumbing debacle, but when I glanced at the screen, it wasn't news. It was a screenshot from Tara, an old coworker who hadn't texted me in months. The image was grainy, clearly cropped from social media. "Family forever," the caption read. The photo was from the reception. Jocelyn in the middle, flanked by my mother, aunts, cousins, even a few second cousins I hadn't seen since I was in braces. Everyone smiled like they were posing for a toothpaste ad. Everyone, except me. I wasn't cropped out. I wasn't edited away. I simply had never been there to begin with. Tara's message followed the image. "This doesn't feel right." I didn't answer. There wasn't anything to say. She was right. It didn't feel right. But it also didn't hurt like it used to. Not anymore. I went back inside, kicked off my boots by the back door, and poured myself a glass of water. Then, with the same calmness I'd used to write out an invoice, I walked to the desk in my office and opened a new document. I typed one sentence. I hope next time the invitation comes before the apology. Underneath, I signed my name. Nothing fancy, no flourish. Just Beatrix. I printed it on heavy paper, the kind I used for framing permits. Folded it cleanly, tucked it into a plain white envelope. No note, no sticky tabs, just a return address in the corner. I didn't bother sealing it with anything but glue. There was nothing emotional left to contain. I drove it to the post office the next morning, dropped it into the outgoing slot without a second thought. It was addressed to Jocelyn's new home, the one she and her new husband had purchased 6 months ago. The same house I had helped them inspect before closing. The same one I'd reinforced the crawl space for, fixed the faulty sump pump, quietly rewired the guest bathroom light. A house, like a person, will only hold its weight for so long without proper care. By afternoon, I was on my porch, trimming back the hydrangeas. The air smelled like cut grass and concrete warmed by sun. In the distance, someone ran a mower. My neighbor waved from across the street. I waved back. Later, while transferring clippings into the bin, I got another ping. A wedding blog had picked up the story again, this time anonymously sourced. The headline read, "What really happened at the Dales? A case of family oversight?" In the comments, someone wrote, "Maybe if you exclude the one who fixed the pipes, things fall apart." The thread was a mix of laughing emojis, wedding horror stories, and speculation. I didn't engage. I didn't repost. Instead, I made a mental note to replace the garden hose coupling near the back fence. Something I'd promised myself I'd get to before August ended. 2 days passed before I received anything else. It came in the mail, no return address, no markings on the outside. Inside the envelope was a photograph, one I hadn't seen in decades. Me and my dad, standing in front of the garage on a late summer afternoon in 1999. I was maybe 9. He was kneeling beside me, pointing at something out of frame. I wore overalls, grease on my cheek. We were both smiling. But what caught me off guard wasn't the photo. It was the handwriting across the bottom, written in fresh ink. "You were always part of the house. Mom." I held it in my lap for a long time, unsure what to feel. Not because it moved me, but because it didn't undo anything. It didn't fix the months of silence, or the years of jokes dressed as affection, or the decision to leave me out of moments while still relying on my labor. But it was something, a fragment of recognition. I didn't cry. I didn't frame the picture or clutch it to my chest like a movie ending. I just placed it on the kitchen counter next to a grocery list and my gloves. Because no matter how late it came, the truth still landed in my hands, and I knew what needed to be done next. I woke up the next morning to the soft clink of my wind chimes and a single shaft of light crawling through the kitchen window, touching the photo of me and Dad where I'd left it. It hadn't moved, still just resting there. No frame, no ceremony, no altar. Just part of my life again. The kettle clicked off behind me, and I poured hot water over the last of my loose-leaf tea. While it steeped, I checked my phone. A forwarded clip waited in my inbox. The sender was a cousin I hadn't spoken to since before the wedding, one of those peripheral relatives who never picked sides but always knew how to forward a link. The video was from a lifestyle influencer. Bright lighting, too much blush, teeth too white to trust. She was breaking down the bathroom wedding that had gone viral for all the wrong reasons. She smiled into the camera and said, "So here's the real twist, apparently. The bride's sister? The one who wasn't even invited? She was the one who actually designed the plumbing infrastructure for the venue." She paused for dramatic effect, then leaned in. "They called her a ghost in the foundation." The video kept playing, but I muted it. The phrase stuck in my ears long after the sound cut out. A ghost in the foundation. It sounded eerie, but also weirdly accurate. They built everything on top of me, then acted surprised when the walls didn't hold. Later that weekend, while out running errands, I got another message. This time, a voice memo from someone who worked with Kimbra. I didn't even need to open it. The text preview said enough. "She should have been there. She always made things hold together." I deleted it. I wasn't collecting crumbs anymore. Not the sideways compliments. Not the revisionist whispers. Not the too late regrets dressed up as empathy. I'd stopped waiting for people to say the right thing in public or in private, because by the time they finally did, it never sounded like honesty. It sounded like guilt trying to clean itself up. That afternoon, I drove 2 hours north to a wooded patch of land I'd signed for last month. Nothing built yet, just soil, pines, and silence. The property sloped gently toward a lake that shimmered even in gray weather. I stood on the future porch spot with my boots pressing into the damp earth. This time, every screw, every bracket, every wire would carry my name. The permits were already filed. The blueprints were folded neatly in the passenger seat of my truck, right beside a thermos and a hard hat with my initials on it. A small cabin, nothing fancy, but mine. No one else's name in the drywall. No one else's expectations lurking behind floral arrangements or half-hearted apologies. The following morning, I started the first step, staking out the corners. Each marker went in with steady hands. Not out of anger, out of clarity. There was power in not needing approval, in not needing the invite, in not asking if this time I would finally be included. The wedding may have faded from headlines, but the cracks it left behind had their own legacy. Not in the gossip, but in what it taught me. That silence can be sacred when you choose it. That walking away is not a failure. It's a blueprint for survival. 2 weeks later, I installed the first fixture on the cabin porch. A wooden chair. Simple, sturdy. Same model as the ones they rented for Jocelyn's reception. But this one had something theirs never did. A small brass plaque drilled clean into the backrest. It read, "For the one they forgot." And I sat in it. Let the wind press past my shoulders, the lake sigh against the shoreline, the past fall behind like old scaffolding I no longer needed. My phone buzzed one last time. Another repost. Another caption. No tag, no name. But the comment section knew. They'll remember me every time something leaks, I whispered aloud to no one in particular. But I won't be the one fixing it anymore. I've learned something the hard way. Just because you're the one holding things together doesn't mean people will thank you for it. Sometimes the more dependable you are, the more invisible you become. But let me tell you this. From one soul to another, silence can be powerful. Walking away, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, might be the most courageous thing you ever do. If you've ever been the one fixing everything, while everyone else took credit, you know exactly what I mean. It's not about revenge. It's about choosing peace over proving yourself to people who decided long ago not to see you. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been pushed aside by the very people who needed you most? Do you believe forgiveness has to come with reconciliation? Or is walking away enough? If this story touched something deep inside you, drop a 1 in the comments, or let me know where you're watching from. And if this didn't hit home for you, tell me why. I'm always open to hearing your side. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss the next story that might just speak to something you've been carrying for years. Thanks for being here. And remember, even the strongest beams crack when they're taken for granted. So choose where you stand, wisely.